What's up, 7th grade? Mr. Pastel here, and today we're going to talk about tectonic plate boundaries. So the first question I want to ask you is, how do you think mountains form? What's your explanation? How do they get so high? Well, one fun fact is that the tallest mountain on Earth, Mount Everest, is actually growing very, very slowly. It's getting a little bit taller every year. And the reason for that is there are two tectonic plates. Remember, they're floating on the liquid mantle. They're coming together, and when they hit each other, in this case, they both go up. I want you to do this with your hands with me. They both go up. And since the tectonic plates are still moving together, the mountain gets just a little bit higher every year. Only by like a few millimeters, probably. But when you add that up over millions of years, the mountains can get very high. So, today we're going to talk about tectonic plate boundaries, and as I explain this, again, I want you to use your hands with me. So there's three types of tectonic plate boundaries. Tectonic plate boundaries are basically where two tectonic plates kind of meet, and they can be moving in three ways. So the first way, do this with me, is here's one plate, here's another. They could be moving apart. That's called a divergent boundary. And you can represent that with arrows going in opposite directions. The second type of boundary is a convergent boundary, which is two plates heading towards each other. So do this with your hands. They're heading towards each other. And once they hit each other, there's a couple things that can happen. And the third type is a transform boundary. So I'll do this kind of sideways. Like, that's two tectonic plates where their sides are kind of grinding against each other, which is a little bit different if you think about it. So there's some friction between the two tectonic plates that are moving kind of opposite directions of each other. So why do we care, and what can happen at these boundaries? So at convergent boundaries, when two plates are headed towards each other, like I started out with, that can cause mountains. So do this with your hands. If both the plates go up, then basically that can form mountains. Volcanoes. So basically they start heading towards each other, and there's some pressure that's built up, but then one kind of goes under the other. One slips under the other, one tectonic plate. That can happen in the opposite direction too. So when one goes under the other, the one that goes under starts to melt and can actually fuel a volcano. So let me go through some pictures here. For the mountains, if you have two heading towards each other, they can push each other up and cause a mountain range. Not just one mountain, but a mountain range like the Appalachian Mountains, the Andes, the Himalayas, which are the ones that have Everest. So it's not just one mountain, it's a whole mountain range. And that's I believe in Patagonia in South America. That ridge. This is how a volcano is made. So this plate is going under, and it starts to melt, but some gases escape and can fuel a volcano. So a volcano is formed at convergent boundaries. And so are mountains. And that's a volcano. Earthquakes also happen at convergent boundaries. Actually, earthquakes happen at all types of boundaries, because whenever two tectonic plates are hitting each other, there's a lot of pressure built up, and when they suddenly move, that causes an earthquake. So let's move to divergent boundaries. When two tectonic plates are moving apart, a few things can happen. So let's say that they move apart on land. This is kind of like what you see in the disaster movies. If two tectonic plates move apart, you can get what's called a rift valley, which is kind of like a chasm or crack in the earth. It doesn't happen quickly, so I guess it's not like the disaster movies, but it's this valley that happens on land as the two tectonic plates move apart from each other. But more commonly, it happens in water. So basically what you can see, so let's look at this second one. The land masses are moving apart, but the rift valley fills with water. And whenever you have this separation in water, something comes up to fill the space that was created in the middle. So actually, what you can see here is because these two tectonic plates in the middle of the ocean are moving apart, magma wants to come up to fill that space. So sometimes when I think of a divergent boundary, I think of like chapped lips in the winter. So if your lips crack in the winter because they're so dry, you'll start to see some blood come up in the crack of your lip. And the same thing happens on Earth. So when plates are moving apart on Earth, magma comes up and dries into igneous rock eventually. You'll see that there's actually a little rise. Because of the pressure underneath, there's a little rise in elevation at this divergent boundary in the middle of the ocean. This is a pretty good view of it, actually, this cross section. So, continental plates moving apart, the crust is moving away from the other crust, and magma comes up in the center to fill it in. And you see this, it's rising up a little bit, kind of like there's some pressure buildup. That's a rift valley, a very old one because they're very far apart, these two continental plates. Actually, there's a good picture online of some dude scuba diving between, let me see if I can find that. I'm going to search scuba diving between tectonic plates on my Ecosia. Yeah. This person is scuba diving in between two divergent tectonic plates. Pretty cool. This is between the Europe and American tectonic plates. And at divergent plates, you will have new seafloor. As plates move apart, you get this magma and it cools and it becomes new seafloor from the igneous rock. You can also have volcanoes at divergent boundaries because the magma has pressure pointing up, so you can also have volcanoes not only because of convergent boundaries but also divergent boundaries because it wants to fill that crack. And you also have rift valleys. And at any tectonic plate, you have earthquakes. Again, earthquakes happen at all types of boundaries: convergent, divergent, and finally transform boundaries. So transform boundaries, when you have two tectonic plates grinding side to side, moving in opposite directions, you don't have volcanoes. You don't really have mountains. What you have is just... What you have is kind of just earthquakes, and you see like little kind of stress wrinkles in the earth, like here. Because these plates are... There's a lot of force involved, actually. They're grinding, and they are producing these little... I call them like stress folds from the two plates hitting each other. So that's it for this YouTube video, but I'm going to explain the activity in more detail in other YouTube videos. Thanks.